Hello and welcome everybody to Streamlining Development, where today we're going to talk about maximizing your productivity using the new Zoom build flow. So I'll be your speaker today. My name is Brendan Pinniger. I am a senior technical sales architect here at Zoom, and I specialize in our Zoom developer platform. So I do need to mention our safe harbor statement. I don't expect you to read this slide, but just please do be aware that any forward-looking statements made during this presentation are subject to change. So I'll cover off the agenda here for you. First of all, why did Zoom create this new build flow? So we'll cover that off for you, as well as I want you to be able to understand what types of apps can you create with the new build flow. Then we'll jump into a demo where I'll show you not only how to create an app and use that for development and testing, but also how to actually submit that to our review team so you can publish that on the Zoom Marketplace if you wish. Then from there, we'll talk about your existing apps. So if you have created legacy apps with our previous build flows, what happens to those apps going forward? And then we'll want to jump into maybe a situation where you've got multiple existing apps. How can you convert those? And then how can you consolidate those apps into a single general app if you wish? But before we go any further, I would like to just run a quick poll. And I'd just like to see how many people are actually have already used the new build flow, or if you're not sure, that's fine as well. We'll cover that off for you today so you understand exactly what it is. So we'll just let this run for a little while. It looks like, yeah, not too many people are that familiar with it. So you're in the right session, which is great. So yeah, Catherine will share those polls with you, the poll results. So we'll get into all those details today so that you understand exactly, what this is. So why did Zoom introduce this new build flow? So I mentioned there that we've got some different legacy app types. So there were different ways to create apps in the past. And due to that, there may have been some duplication of effort where you're having to enter information multiple times and create these different apps. There's a lot of additional work required to do all that. Hence, Zoom has now created a single general app with a unified build flow that supports these different app types. So one app to rule them all. Now with that, again, to minimize work, you could now submit that single app instead of having to submit for multiple times for app review to get multiple apps onto the Zoom Marketplace. Now, along with that, that actually simplifies the experience for our IT admins and our end users as well. So today, if you have multiple use cases you're solving with multiple apps, they have to search our marketplace and identify, well, which of these apps do I actually need, right? So by having a single app, again, submitted that once to our marketplace, it's much easier for those IT admins and end users to review, authorize, and install and use your app. So we've got SDK apps, we've got Team Chat, OAuth, Zoom apps, all rolled up into this new unified build flow. What that means is you can actually surface your app inside of Zoom. You can also create integrations, accessing our APIs and webhooks. And you can embed our Zoom SDKs inside of your website, or using that same build flow. So again, I can surface my app inside of a Zoom meeting. I could surface it in a team chat or even in a Zoom room. And I can create integrations using the access methods, as well as embed those SDKs inside of my apps or websites. So let's just take a closer look at what that means. So we've hit these terms: surface, access, and embed. I'll get to connect in a minute. Surfacing, as I touched on, there are different parts of the Zoom client where you might want users to interact with your application. So we can surface that using our JavaScript SDK in a web viewer inside of the same window as a Zoom meeting, a Zoom webinar. Again, we can run that on Zoom Rooms as well. Or you might have users that are using Zoom Phone, Team Chat, or Contact Center, or other products. So you can surface your app in multiple ways inside of Zoom. Next, you might want to create some sort of integration using our APIs or webhooks, and that is the access method. So you're accessing Zoom's APIs and webhooks via our backend developer platform. And then the third one there, embed. So you want to take some Zoom functionality. Maybe you want users to join Zoom meetings via our SDK, but inside of your app or website, or they might be wanting to leverage Zoom phone functionality or contact center, again, inside of your app or website. So those are the three terms you'll see surface, access, embed as we go through the build flow today in the demo. So I just want to make sure you're comfortable and understand what those terms mean. Now, this last one here, connect. We're not going to talk about that today, but that is new functionality that will be surfaced inside of the build flow in the near future. So we do have these connectors today. Think of them as no code, easy workflow editor type solutions where you can create integrations inside of Zoom using pre-built connectors, or you can create custom connectors as well. So that's more to follow on that, but just wanted you to be aware that will be available inside the build flow in the near future. So looking at that from a slightly different angle, from our developer platform framework, again, we have the ability to connect via the backend inside of Zoom. So that's that no-code workflow editor solution, making it easy for you to build integrations in Zoom. Next, you might want to surface your apps, again, within Zoom, in the Zoom client, on Zoom Rooms, and that is the Zoom apps way to surface via the front end. Now, what if I want to create integrations the old-fashioned way, using APIs and webhooks inside of my own code, my own apps? That's the access method. And then finally, embedding. Again, we're doing this via third party inside your applications on the front end, surfacing Zoom via SDKs, but inside your app this time, not the Zoom app. Now, there is a final bubble there, build, which represents our Zoom video SDK. So that is not part of the unified build flow, is not part of our general app, but it is part of our developer platform. So I wanted to leave that there just for completeness of vision. So you can build custom video solutions using our video SDK. And we've had other sessions on that during the developer summit. So hopefully you've caught some of those. Right, now we're going to jump into the demo. So we're going to build a general app. So the unified build flow is the actual flow of everything that we'll create inside of the general app. Now let me just jump out and I'm going to go into my Zoom Marketplace. And you'll see here, we've got the ability to develop and we can build an app. So the build legacy app option there, we'll talk about that in a moment. That will be going away in the near future. And your option will be this build app dialog. And also talk about these other app types in a moment as well. So you'll have three options going forward. You can build the general app, you can build the server-to-server OAuth app, or you'll be able to build a webhook-only app. So the goal is to get all of these apps into a single general app at some point in the future. But for now, going forward, we'll have these three app types that you can choose from. So we'll create a general app. And we're on the basic information page. And if I just draw your attention to the top left of the screen, you'll see that the build flow has created an app name for us. So one of the first things you'll want to do is give that a more descriptive name, obviously for your own purposes, as well as the users who will end up using the app. I'm just going to call this Dev Summit Demo for today. Okay, so straight away it saves my name for me. And you also see here that it says it's a user managed app. Okay, so do I want to have a user managed app or do I want this to be an admin managed app? Meaning that I'll have access to scopes and webhooks and functionality at the account level authorized by an admin, or is my app going to be accessing and requiring permissions just at the user level? Okay, so I need to make that decision. I make that once here and I can change that if I need to. We'll leave it as a user-managed app today, but just be aware, right, that does affect the scopes and permissions that are available within the app. Next, I'll scroll down and we'll see here our OAuth information. So this is used across the app So we'll want to have a redirect URL here. Now, for the demo, I'm just going to use zoom.us. We're not actually building a full app as part of the demo today. We're just interested in showing you how the build flow works and what features are available. So I'm just going to put zoom.us in there for now. Now, the last thing I'll point out is our app credentials are here available at any time, but they're also available in the top left part of the screen as well. So I can copy, start using these to create access tokens at any point. Okay, so when I click continue, that now takes me to the access screen. So here's where you see access, surface, and embed. We're going to enable the features that our app is going to support. So access here is actually allowing us to subscribe to events for our webhooks. So I'll just quickly show you what that looks like. Hopefully you may have used that before. We can have multiple event subscriptions. We can give those different names and select the different types of events that we want to subscribe to. Okay, so you can, again, add multiple of those if you want. I'm going to leave that off for now, but just be aware, this is where you would configure access for your webhooks. Now, the next tab is our Surface tab. So we have the ability here now to choose different products where we want to surface our app, or different functionality that we want to turn on inside of our app. So for example, if I want my app to be visible to users in the Zoom client inside of meetings, webinars, phone, Zoom room, whatever, I need to check these boxes to enable that functionality. Okay, as we scroll down, you'll see that some features are not available if I haven't selected the right options. So if I wanted to turn on team chat and configure these options here, I need to make sure that I turn on team chat in the features box at the top. Okay, obviously I'll need my URLs, my domains that need to be supported as well. And then again, if I'm turning on Zoom apps, I'll need access to various APIs that get used within the SDK. So this is where I would configure that. So this is different from backend Zoom APIs. These are the APIs that will be exposed inside of the JavaScript SDK for your Zoom app that you want to create. So you can search in here for different APIs. I might want to get the context information in the call. I might also want to subscribe to APIs and events. Maybe my app is going to allow the user to create or set virtual backgrounds. Okay, so I can add whatever APIs and events are needed there. Then I can also turn on other features, guest mode, in-client OAuth. So if you're not familiar with Zoom apps, please go and look at the documentation. We have sample apps as well that show all of this functionality. So the goal today is not to teach you how to build Zoom apps, but just to show you what's required inside of the general app in order to enable that functionality. Okay, I can also do things like enable this within the mobile client. So by default, all the Zoom apps are supported within the desktop client. If I want to enable for mobile, I need to turn this support on as well. And if I'm developing for iOS, I need my Apple developer team ID and just acknowledge those restrictions there as well. So again, if I want to turn it on for Zoom rooms or the progressive web application, I need to be able to select these options here. So that's surfacing, right? We're using Zoom apps in the Surface tab. The last tab here is the Embed tab. And this is where I'm going to decide, do I need to support any of the SDKs? So if I wanted to allow users, for example, to join Zoom meetings via the meeting SDK inside my app or website, I would enable the feature here. So this is really enabling my credentials for this app to work with the SDK. Now, I can also do things like download the different SDK clients here if I need that as well. And I can turn on multiple SDKs as well. So it's not, one SDK. All of these can be toggled on if you need to support all of them in that same app. Okay, so we're done with our Access, Surface, and Embed tabs now. The final one here is the Scopes tab. And based on some of the features that you've turned on, you'll notice I already have some scopes pre-selected for me. But again, I might want to access the APIs and add additional scopes. So again, for example, if I go to meetings, maybe I want to start viewing meeting information, viewer users meetings. I can add as many of those scopes as I need. Just remembering all these scopes get presented to the users, right? So they have to approve them. And one other thing to be aware of is we've added a capability called optional scopes. So as you're adding these scopes, you can decide, are they required or is it optional? And if it's optional, then the user can choose, obviously, if they want to approve that scope or not. So that's something that is very important. As we get into the later part of this session today, I will talk about how you consolidate multiple existing apps into a single general app. When you do that, maybe some of that additional functionality is not relevant to all users of your app. In that case, you might want to make those scopes optional for some of those users. So just be aware of that. We do have documentation as well that talks about optional scopes. So do go read up on that. Now, I'm not going to fill in the scope description here, but just be aware that is required for the app submission process. And I'll show you in a minute, you'll get prompted for any information that you've missed in the build flow that is required for app review. You will get prompted a little bit later here. So we'll just finish that for now. We've added our scopes, and that brings me to the test page. So the first thing you'll notice here is I can preview the app listing page. So this is what the app would look like on our marketplace, right? If you list your app on our marketplace. So you see it's kind of plain at the moment. It says, well, this is what the app works in. These are the permissions, scopes, and everything that are required by the app, but not a lot else there. So there's still quite a bit of information we would need to provide in order to get this published to our marketplace. So let's just close out. We're just focused on development and testing at the moment, right? So we've filled out everything we need to start testing. You'll notice here we've got the Add App button and our authorization URL. We do need to generate that. Okay, so now I've got a URL that I can share with other testers. Could be other developers that I'm collaborating with, or just people that I want to test my app within the account. So they need to have a user account created inside of this account. Or I can simply go and add the app for myself now. So if I click Add App, that's going to take me to the authorization page. I've got all the permissions, data that's going to be collected, and I can click Allow. So you'll see this has taken us to our redirect URL, which is zoom.us for just this demo example. There's my code that is passed back from my authorization process. So now I can use that to go and generate an access token. So obviously in a real environment, you would be retrieving that code via your code in order to do that via the APIs. Okay, so now we've got a remove app button if we need to go and remove the app as well. So all of this, we've been configuring our development credentials at this point. So our app credentials up here, they say development. If I go over to production, we see that changes to production, and I have different credentials under production. You'll also notice for my OAuth URL, I can put in a different URL for production as well. So my development and production environments both have different credentials, as well as give me an option to provide different URLs. The features that I've added under development are still there. So if I go to Surface, for example, you see I selected meetings, webinars, and team chat under the development tab. That's carried forward to the production tab. But if I needed to put in a different home URL, that sort of thing, I can do that here if I need to. Now, the other thing I want to draw your attention to is that under my beta test, as well as my app submission, it says not ready, okay? So it is telling me what information here is required in order to be ready for the beta test, as well as the app submission. Okay. Now, just to save us a bit of time, I'm going to jump over to another app that I've created earlier where I've pre-filled a lot of this information. So if I jump down to my beta test, we see here that it is ready to test, and I've got my code that's been generated. So again, the client ID for my authorization URL under production is different from my authorization URL under development. So just because I've added the app under development does not mean I now have access to the production version of the app. So I would need to add the app again here under production if I want to test the production version of the app. Hopefully that makes sense to you as well. Now, another thing you'll notice here is I've got share within your account is active. So again, I can share this URL with users inside my account. But what if I have people outside of the account that I want them to do some testing? So it might be a consultant that doesn't have a user account inside the account. I want to share that with them. So I can do that. You see the request to share button down here. You see mine is inactive. I did submit a request earlier to our team. However, it was declined because even though I had answered all of the technical design and app listing questions, I had not uploaded all of the required documentation. So that request was declined. So just be aware, in order for that request to be approved for external user testing, you will need to make sure you've done all of the app listing technical design stuff first. So let's go back to that real quick. Under my app listing page, there's information here that you'll want to submit, even if you're not going to submit this for the Zoom Marketplace. So for example, the app icon, the name, short description, long description, these things will be visible to your internal users, even if you don't want to publish this externally. So you still want to add those, the cover image, this app gallery images, these will all appear on the marketplace. So again, if this is an internal only app, you may not be bothered with uploading all of this, but you do need this if you are going to submit to the app marketplace. Right, you want your company name, developer contact information, and then the last thing on this screen is the different categories. So these are the categories that your app would be visible under within our market listing in the marketplace. So as people are browsing for your app, they would show up under these categories. So if we go forward now, looking at the links and support, you have to add links. Again, these are going to your website and providing information on your privacy policy, your terms of use, support, and documentation. So you have to provide all of that. These have to be valid links for this to be approved by the app reviewers. Then how are people going to add your app? Will they go to your website to add the app, or will they be doing that from the Zoom Marketplace? So you make that decision here as well. If users are going to configure your app, do you have a link for that? Will people need to go there in order to set that up before they can use the app? So that's entirely optional. And then you do need to provide an endpoint URL for deauthorization. So if users want to deauth, stop using your app, you'll need to include that one as well. So from there, we get to the technical design document. So there's three sections to this. As you can see, we've got the overview section where we've got 5 questions, 3 questions for security, and 15 for privacy. Now, a lot of these are yes, no answers. Again, I've pre-filled these, put in some information. I've uploaded some documents such as an architecture diagram. These are all dummy documents, which is why my approval was denied because I haven't uploaded all of these actual required documents. So you'll need to do that. If we click continue, it takes us over to the security tab. 3 pretty straightforward questions here. One that you do need to provide a written answer for. And then finally, we've got the privacy section. Again, a bunch of yes, no answers and just a few that you need to provide a written answer for. So once you've done all that, again, you get back to the beta test page. You can add your app there. And then finally, we would get to the app submission page. So there's a few final steps that you need to take before you can actually submit for app review. And you'll notice the first one there is to verify the domains. So whatever domains I've added within the app features, I'll need to go and verify. And I can do that via multiple ways. You see I've got the verify button here. I can add a text record, an HTML file or a meta tag, or I can ask Zoom support to manually approve this. So again, use the method that makes sense for you. Now, obviously, zoom.us, I'm not an administrator of that domain. I'm not going to be able to do that verification. So again, you do need to make sure any domains you're adding, you do own those and you can do that verification. You have an opportunity here to add any notes for the app reviewer if you want. How do you want the app to be published? And then are there any test account credentials required by the app reviewers in order to test your app? And then after that, just make sure you've agreed to the terms and conditions here, and then you can go ahead and actually submit the app. So that's the end of all the configuration that's required. Again, if you're just testing, go through the development tab, generate your authorization URL, add your app, and you're good to go. If you want to go ahead and then start deploying it to users or publishing it to our Zoom marketplace, you'll want to go through the production tab at that point and add as much information as you can. Now, a couple other things to call out on the top right-hand side here. We've got a nice little flow of where your app is in within the review process. Okay, so we're ready for submission. Once I hit submit, it'll be then sitting waiting for the functional review, security review, and so on. So you can always come in here and see where your app is sitting within that review process. So that's a nice check for you. You can also add some comments and notes in here as well for the app reviewers if you need to. And lastly, we've got our beta test authorization URL. So at any time, no matter what screen I'm on, I can access this dialog here. If I need to update that authorization URL, add the app. I've got my preview of my listing page. That's accessible up here at all times as well. And then last but not least, if I want to view metrics about my app, manage app collaborators, so I can have multiple people all collaborating on this same app. I can share that with other people. Again, they have to be inside of my account with the right permissions to do that, but I can add multiple collaborators or transfer the app ownership. So if I'm leaving the company or moving on to another project or something, I can transfer this app to somebody else. So that's it for the demo piece. I'll jump back to our slides now. And yeah, let's keep moving on. So talking about those existing apps, we've covered off everything you need to know, hopefully, about the general app and the new build flow. What about those previous app types, those legacy apps? So there were quite a lot of them, as I mentioned, and we've consolidated a lot of them down to a general app. Those existing apps will continue to be supported. So any apps that you've created up to this point, there's no plans at this time to deprecate or disable those apps. You will be able to continue using them for the foreseeable future. So that's not to say that we won't disable them at some point, but we don't have a timeline currently. Now, what we do encourage you to do is to go and convert those existing apps into the general app, those that are supported. And I'll go through that conversion process for you in a moment. At the moment, it is a manual process. We may automate that sometime in the near future, but again, that hasn't been determined at this time. So again, we encourage you to convert the apps where you can. And there are lots of advantages, as we've talked about so far, for you doing that. More functionality within that new build flow. There are two existing app types that will stay the same for the foreseeable future. So you will continue to be able to create server-to-server apps and webhook only apps. So we touched on that in the demo. What does that mean? A server-to-server app is an internal only app at the account level, and the access tokens are generated programmatically. So it does use OAuth, but there's no user or admin authorizing your app in this app type. So it's done programmatically on the back end where you generate those tokens. They expire after an hour. If you need another one, you just generate another one. So that app type will still be available, as will the webhook only app. So this is another account level app that does not use OAuth. So the theme, if you haven't picked up on that already, for a general app at the moment, all those app types that support OAuth are supported as a general app. The server-to-server app and webhook only that don't use regular user-based OAuth are not supported there yet. So we hope to get those included at some point. So just back on the existing apps, those app types that we just mentioned, server-to-server and webhook only, after this week, you'll still be able to create those, but the other legacy app types, we will be deprecating the ability to create new legacy apps. Okay, so where you have OAuth apps, Zoom apps, Team Chat, SDK apps, You could create them separately in the past. After this weekend, you will only be able to create the new general app for those app types. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. After this weekend, 3 options: general app, server to server, and webhook only. Now, any existing apps that you've already created, they won't be affected, but you won't be able to create new legacy app types. All right, so what does that conversion process look like? When you log into the marketplace and you go into manage your apps, you'll see all your created apps. The apps that are supported for conversion will have a start conversion button showing on the app. So that's how you'll start the conversion process. Before you do that though, and in order to create a general app or to convert one of your legacy apps to a general app, you need to make sure that you have the Zoom for developers root level permissions. Okay, so how does that happen? The IT admin or owner of the account needs to log in, go to user management, and then under the roles, they need to make sure that the role that you have has this Zoom for developers view and edit permissions enabled. So again, this is the root level. Under that, you will see that we do still have like granular permissions for the other app types. Those are the existing apps that will be deprecated soon. Those granular scopes, granular permissions will go away, and we'll just end up eventually having just this Zoom for developers root level permissions. So again, in order to do a general app, you need to have these permissions enabled. Now, the other thing to be aware of before you start that conversion process is no data is actually changed for your app. Okay, we're just presenting the data in a different way. So we're presenting your app, information, credentials, the features in a new UI, but nothing's actually changing. So there's no impact to those existing users of the app. Now, having said that, if you then go in and add additional features and scopes, that can trigger the app review, and the additional scopes will require a user to reauthorize the app. So be aware of that. But just converting the app to a general app, there's no change, no additional permissions required. So nothing different for those end users when you do that. So how do you do that? Again, go into Marketplace, go into the Manage Apps options, Created Apps, and you'll click the Start Conversion button. You'll get a nice dialog telling you what's going to happen. And then you can click Start Conversion again to kick off that process, or cancel if you've decided you don't need to or don't want to start that conversion process yet. Once you've done that, again, it'll happen instantaneously. And in the top right-hand side, you'll see that we've got a revert button and a confirm conversion button. So you have an option to back out at this point. If you hit the confirm conversion button though, you'll get one last dialog at this point. And then if you click confirm again, now you no longer have the ability to revert back to the legacy app view. Okay. Again, no data is getting changed at all at any point of this process. In the conversion, if you revert, nothing changes on the back end. It's just how the information is presented to you, the developer. Okay, so getting into the final stretch here, what happens if I've got multiple apps and I want to consolidate them into a single general app? Okay, so I'm talking about those legacy app types now. I've got an OAuth app, I've got a team chat app, I've got an SDK app, a Zoom app, or any combination of those, and I want to consolidate them down into that single general app type to take advantage of, again, single app submission, easier for IT admins and end users to install, manage that single app. So, I might just have 2 apps, I might have 3 or 4, or I might even decide, hey, I want to take advantage of the general app, but I'm going to build a brand new app, leave my legacy apps alone, and I'll migrate users later on. So why would you do that? Let's go through that as well. The consolidation process is going to be the same no matter how many apps you have, but for simplification, we'll go through just 2 apps in this scenario. So the process would be, you'll decide which of these 2 apps will be the new consolidated app going forward. Okay. Once you've made that decision, log into the marketplace, open up that app. If you haven't gone through the conversion process yet, you would want to do that at this time. view the app within the new build flow UI. And then in a second tab or second browser, you'll want to view the information for that second app. What are the features, scopes, permissions required for that second app? Now, unfortunately, it's a manual process, right? There's no automatic conversion because we can't cover every single scenario of every different app type and all the different options that you might have configured to automatically convert those into a single app for you. So what you have to do is go through that second or any subsequent apps that you want consolidated into that first app, manually add, configure those settings, those features, those scopes within the new consolidated app. Okay, once you've done that, okay, now your app is going to be different, right? So this is a key thing to remember as I consolidate multiple apps into one. Now I'm adding more functionality. So my app listing page needs to incorporate all of that information for the users, right? I may have to update screenshots. I may have to update the name of the app because, maybe the old name doesn't reflect all of the new functionality that will be available in this consolidated version of the app. So I want to update the app listing page. I want to update the technical design document. That's changed as well, right? So I'm adding more functionality. I need to reflect that in the technical design document, and I'll need to update those app submission screens. So all of the stuff that we filled out for the app review process, you'll want to review all of that. So that's the process, again, at a fairly high level. What are the considerations before I go ahead and do this, right? One of the first things I touched on in the demo was that you can choose admin managed or user managed, and that's once at the app level. I can't have some part of the app user managed and some part of the app admin managed, at least not at this time. So any apps that I'm going to consolidate together into a single app need to be either app admin managed or user managed. I can't merge different types of apps, some that are admin, some that are user. They'll also share that OAuth redirect URL. Now, I had a different one for development and a different one for testing, but for the end users, they'll all get redirected to the same URL. So that's really just a consideration for you. You'll need to make sure that your backend supports that for now multiple apps. Now, I touched on the optional scopes before. Again, as you're adding more and more scopes in there, are all these scopes required for all users, or are some of them optional? You want to consider that as well. And then just stepping back a little bit, thinking about the end users. So do I have different types of users that were using these different legacy apps? Is the experience that they're going to have after I've consolidated the app, is it going to be more confusing, or is it going to be still user-friendly and they'll be able to achieve things simply? We don't want to add friction in this process. So this is not in any way me saying that you shouldn't consolidate these apps. It's more just let's think about that user experience as we go ahead and do this. Then, as I mentioned, if you add new scopes, which you're going to end up doing most likely, as you're adding other apps into this new consolidated app, you'll add scopes. So just be aware, the users will have to reauthorize the app before they can use that new functionality. And then finally, just, how are you doing monitoring, logging, reporting of activity in the app? Make sure you're considering that as well. So finally, if I do have 3 or 4 multiple apps that I want to consolidate, it's really the same process. You're just, going through that for each subsequent app, adding that functionality into the new consolidated app. But there is a higher chance of complexity and confusion, especially if those apps were built to solve different use cases, right? So just be aware of that. You step back, think about the end user experience. How is it going to affect those users? Are there too many optional scopes? Like, some users may not understand which scopes they need to add if there are a whole bunch of optional scopes that they need to make a decision on, right? So just think about what's that like for the end user as they go through and try to authorize this new version of the app. All right, last but not least here, what if I decide just to create a brand new general app, not to consolidate my existing apps? Why would I do that? I think of it, especially being relevant to very large enterprise customers, financial customers, government customers. These are the types of customers that really want to spend time, especially from a security perspective, reviewing what your app does, right? They're very concerned about what permissions users are granting to third parties, what access you have to data within their account. So anytime you make a change, I mentioned, users having to reauthorize the app, right? That can alert the admins on these accounts that, hey, I need to, stop, review this app before I allow my users to continue using it, because it's asking for a whole bunch of additional permissions now that my security team needs to review. So really this is just again, something to consider. What's going to happen if I consolidate multiple apps versus, hey, I could create a new app. The existing users, they can keep using those legacy apps, no change, but the IT teams, the security teams have time to go and review my new general app that I've created before they approve that and make it available to users, who can then migrate to that over time. Okay, so that brings us towards the end of the actual presentation. We do have some resources here. I'm going to try to copy these over into the chat now for you as well. But I'll just see if there are any questions as well that need to be answered. Catherine, do you know if we have any Q&A that's popped up? Let me have a look. We do. Okay. So how do you think about support timelines? If we put work into converting apps now, is the new general app likely to be deprecated in another 6 to 12 months? I see actually Chait. Well, Chait, you're going to answer this one live.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Brendan.
Right.
Thank you,
So
Joshua, for the question. Hopefully everyone can hear me fine. Yeah, I think effective, just to take a step back, right? I think that's a great question. So now when we talk about deprecating, I think just to use the feels like a very strong word, but even the current conversion we're talking about is effectively updating the UI, how the build flow was represented to the developer to the new build flow, which effectively allows for more functionality. So by converting or when we talk about deprecating the app itself that you've developed before, it's not changing. The subscribers of the app continue to use the app as it was built. There's no zero change to that functionality. The big thing is effectively how the developer interacts with or configures the app in the build flow is the change. Now, I think our goal is general app is the app going forward, like meaning there shouldn't be a deprecation of the general app in another 6 months, at least not according to our plan. And even if they're, again, were to happen, I think our goal would be to continue supporting as we are doing today with our legacy apps. We will continue to support them and give a graceful experience in terms of moving from the legacy to the new build flow, which is what we are talking about here with the conversion support that Brendan went through. I think especially when we talk about the app conversion from legacy to the new build flow, it was a concerted, I guess, choice of making it a bit of a manual process where we wanted the developer to feel the ownership of the app. So we wanted them to make that transition from the older UI to the new UI. We do have plans in the future to support automation so that the developer doesn't have to perform that action, but we perform that action on their behalf, where going forward, they'll see the app in the new UI. Again, when I say see the app in the new UI, we're talking about the build flow, not the app itself. So hopefully that answered the question. And I think actually I love your recommendation as well towards the end about APIs, because that's effectively what we're also working towards, the ability for developers to be able to build apps programmatically to hopefully decrease the effort required, especially from a standpoint of coming to the GUI, make updates, and make it more CI/CD friendly. So I don't know
Great.
if there's anything else you wanted to add there, Brendan? Okay.
Yeah, no, I think it looks like that's answered all the questions. or can we have a kind of certification for the summit? Okay, I'm not sure. That's probably more of a general question for the developer summit overall. So not sure about that. We'll have to take that back to the team and see what they think about that. So,
Yep.
and I see Amanda's on the call. So Amanda, that might be one that you can follow up on. Great. All right. We are a little bit over time, everybody. So again, thanks very much for attending. Chat, did you have one thing?
I think there was one more question from Joshua as well. Maybe last minute I can just take this minute to answer that question as well.
Sure.
Since a consolidated app is likely, I think the question is, I don't know if everyone can see the question. So since a consolidated app is likely to need to be updated more frequently, how are you thinking about the review timelines, especially security review, as you encourage more consolidation? So yes, I think this is a great point. Again, with regards to our aim for consolidation is basically to have developers to not to go through more reviews with the individual apps, and have one app listing that admins can approve and have more customers use those apps. So that's the, I guess, reason for doing it. Now, with regards to security reviews, I think our review team is understanding of this fact, and especially, and the time it takes to get an app reviewed from a create request versus an update request is greatly reduced, because most of the critical questions are already answered, and usually on an update scenario, we're just incrementally testing the app. So hopefully the timelines aren't too great or not great, especially shouldn't be as great as the create requests are. But I think, again, that's again another promise that we have to our customers is apps that are on our marketplace are truly vetted and has the best in class practices from like what our customers expect of Zoom. So I think we will do the due diligence and do it as efficiently as we can. So yeah,
Great.
thank you. Thanks, Joshua, for the questions.
I think Amanda's answered the other question about certification. So we do have a networking event that's running now, everybody. So if you go back to the lobby and would like to do some networking, please do check out the networking session and jump over there. And I'll be heading over there myself as well. So hopefully see you there. And thanks for attending the session. And thanks, Chait, for helping with the Q&A. Appreciate it.
Definitely. Thank you.